Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mastrius. Come on in and grab a seat to make yourselves at home. I'm Julie DeBoer. I'm a professional artist, a founder of Mastrius, a member at Mastrius receiving mentorship, and a mentor working with aspiring artists. And this is our lunch hour deep dive into the life and art of Master Artist Milisa Galazzi. If you're new to Mastrius, we're so happy you've joined us. Mastrius is a supportive and non-competitive community where growing artists receive monthly mentorship from their choice of master or professional artist. We do everything in small groups and together in our larger community in our weekly events like today's chat with Milisa. Milisa, feel free to join me on the stage. She is joining us from Providence, Rhode Island. She studies the art of human connection, and her work tells the story of her findings. She's best known for her abstract paintings, works on paper, and installations using a mix of mediums like rope, thread, paper, wax, and paint. Milisa was boat schooled as a child. She and her family traveled and lived abroad. Their 31-foot sailboat her father built by hand, which is amazing. She holds a BA from Brown University, an MA with honors from the Rhode Island School of Design, and she's been published by Harvard University. She exhibits nationally in museums and galleries. She presents talks at international conferences and teaches classes at universities. She's the founder and director of Full Palette, an organization cultivating creativity and mindfulness for a better world, which I'm excited to talk about. And I'm so glad our paths crossed because I am going to be mentored by Milisa here in a few weeks, and I'm super excited about it. For the artists in the audience, sorry, if you're an accomplished artist, meaning you have maybe 10-ish years of dedicated practice, we have space in Milisa's mentorship group starting in September. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Milisa, how are you?
I'm well. It's great to be here. And I'm coming to you live from my kitchen where it's nice and cool. It's about 88 degrees and sunny in Providence with not a breath of wind. And so nice and cool in my kitchen.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, and I always forget to introduce myself. So I mentioned I'm an artist. I'm one of the founders. I'm a mentor, etc. This is my work. I work in acrylic, bold, whimsical landscapes usually. I'm working towards an abstracted impressionism, and my passion is to translate my experience in nature, where I feel most closely connected to God, into a visual, inspiring, and joy-filled, powerful visual display. Anyway, so that's a little bit about me. Also, folks, I'm going to be staying on the call after we're done chatting with Milisa to talk more about Mastrius. If you're new to the community, I can explain what we're doing and how we do it. And we will give away a 1-month events membership to one of the guests who sticks around. And as always in our events, this is meant to be interactive. We want to hear from you. We want your questions, your comments. So find the little chat icon at the bottom of your screen, pop it open, toggle the chat to everyone so we can see your comments, and let us know where you're from, if you're a member or not, and that's where you can stick the questions to that come to your mind. Milisa really does want to answer your questions, so we're happy for this conversation to go any direction. Keep that in mind as we go. All right. So, Milisa, where to start? I know that when we talk about you at Mastrius, you are, to my mind, you're like this really authentic artist. When I look at you and think about you, it's where I want to go someday, and that's kind of my goal. I want to be an artist that produces work that really needs to come out of me, without thinking about selling it and kind of that production part of it. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you?
Yes, and I think that's been something I've thought a lot about in my practice and in my career. And people often say, well, when did you know you were an artist, or how did you, like, what was your kind of like your initial story around art. And what I remember is, you know, adults would say, so what do you want to be when you grow up? When I was literally 4, 5. And I would say, what do you mean when I grow up? I already am an artist. I'm not going to wait. Why do I have to wait? And, you know, I asked my mom at about that age, I think I was 5, if I could pull down the shade in my bedroom. It was a plastic shade. And could I just draw all over it? And then it would go up during the day and no one would see it. And so I would go into my bedroom. I haven't even remembered this in such a long time. And I would pull the shade down and then just draw and doodle all over it. So I think and I would stand up on my bed and bounce and draw. And it's very similar to the work that I do in my studio now. I like to work standing up. I like to work big. So from a very young age, I knew I wanted to be an artist, but I also knew as I got to high school and college that I didn't want to be a starving artist. You know, I didn't want to, you know, live on a mattress on the floor. And so very quickly, I realized I had to figure out how to fund this thing. And I think that basically I've come up with, you know, four different or maybe 5 different ways that artists fund their practice. And I can go into that if people are interested, but I think ultimately I've always chosen to have a pay the bills job on the side, whether that's teaching art, mentoring, speaking, administrating. I have an education degree in art and education, so that I could enter my studio and just make the work that I want to make. This to make work that will sell in order for me to go buy groceries. And so I think that ultimately we have to really think about what are we asking of our art practice? What do we need from our art practice? What can we give it? And what do we receive from it? And so what I've chosen to give my practice is time and space and as much kind of openness and freedom as possible without have to, shoulds, musts, constraints of, well, I have to make X dollars, I have to produce X amount. And that's just the way I've carved it out. There are pros and cons to that. You know, the pros are that when I enter my studio, it really is me, authentic me, meeting the materials and asking questions of myself and letting my hands answer the question in the making of the work. The downside is I'm split. I have these, you know, I always have a pay the bills job that's like taking time and energy, and I have to balance, where's my studio time? And but the pay the bills jobs that I have done cross-pollinate with my art. And so it, in the best of times, it fuels, you know, I have to create the space to be in the studio. Once I get into the studio, I have a lot of rich resources from which to draw in order to make my work. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, but it just brings to mind so many more questions.
Great. Ask away.
All right. So, okay, you said let your hands answer the questions you're asking. Tell me what you mean by that and what questions are you asking? What should we be asking?
Yeah, so I think that when I enter my studio, you know, I work hard to kind of sometimes I even leave my phone in my glove compartment of my car. And really, that's sort of the beginning. If, you know, if I have one of my kids needs something, I won't do that, and I'll silence it. But as much as possible, as I'm walking down the hallway, I'm really like shedding the distractions. And I often pause at my door before I put the key in the lock, and I just breathe so that when I walk in, I am arriving. I'm arriving to the space. I'm arriving to myself. You know, I turn on the lights, I turn on the heat or the air conditioning, depending on the season. I usually make myself a cup of tea. You know, I take 10 or 15 minutes to kind of settle. And then if I'm really engaged in a series and I've got, you know, I very often will leave the night before the next thing to do. Like I will stop just short of finish so that I know exactly where I'm picking up. Like, oh, that'll be a great place to start tomorrow, as opposed to, I don't really know. Like I kind of leave almost like Hansel and Gretel leaving little, you know, like tracks for myself. Like I want to have like, oh, that's where I was, and now I'm going to pick up on that. That's when I'm really on a roll and things are working well. Sometimes I don't have that, and I just need to sit. I listen to nothing in my studio. I found that when I was listening to music or books on tape, that was sort of coming into my work. However, the one time I was working for a gallery delivery date and I was way behind, and they need, you know, it's a seasonal gallery. They needed 10 or 20 paintings delivered, and I was way behind, and it was spring. And so I decided to put on Christmas carols because that would make me emotionally be back in December where I planned. And so I made a whole body of work for the gallery with Christmas carols, which sometimes grate on me during the holiday season, but it was such a relief. It was like, I got nothing but time. It's only December. So I think you can play with, you know, what you put into your senses can help or hurt. So pretty much I like to listen to my own breathing. I like to listen to, you know, just the sounds of the studio, the mixing or the whatever. The types of questions I ask myself are really depend on where I'm engaged in a series of work. You know, if I'm just starting, they're not really intellectual questions. I try to quiet my brain. I try to quiet the questions. Now, one of the things is that I have a very active mind, and it is both, you know, I think that our gifts and our challenges are often the flip side of the same coin. So I have a very active brain, and sometimes when I'm not in a good personal space, I can be very self-critical, and the voice can sound like, ugh, why are you doing that? That's stupid. That's not anything. That's not pretty. That's a dumb mark. Why are you doing that? You're not even an artist. And I call that voice Bitchy Bertha. And when Bitchy Bertha is really on a roll, I literally say, okay, Bertha, not today. You go sit in the corner, like I'm fine. Or sometimes if it's really bad, I will literally walk to the door and I will usher her out and say, okay, you go stay in the hallway. I'll come back and get you after I'm done. Because I really want I want peace. I want the work to come from my soul and my heart. And the only way to get out of my head and down into my body is by quieting all of that. Does that help? And that's where, you know, it's like a meditation practice. It's like an exercise practice. It's like a music practice where you do the scales. Like sometimes I have to set up a challenge for myself to get, you know, to start asking the questions. And one of the questions I ask very often is, what if? What if I did this? What if I tried that? What if I added that? What if? Because I think the joy of what if is it instills curiosity. And when I say what if, I don't sit there saying, well, what if I did that, then this? I say, well, what if I picked up white thread and paper and then I let my hands answer the question? Well, it's hard with this needle and this thread, or this paper's too thick, or let me get some thinner paper. Or what if I did it with colored thread instead of white thread? What if I did this sitting down versus standing? How would it feel or be different? Like, I think probably my favorite question to ask myself is what if?
That's good. Okay. Very clarifying. I wasn't sure if it was like, my mind went to all sorts of questions, but more negative because I have a bitchy Bertha as well I need to deal with.
I mean, let's just talk about that, because I think so many people do, and it's you know, am I schizophrenic because I have these voices in my head? You know, here's what I have learned in really studying it. That voice, you know, some people call it your alter ego or your whatever. I think that voice serves to protect us. Like that voice wants me to stay a little small and stay successful in this little box that I know I'm successful in. And as an artist, I want to always be kind of leaning, you know, I'm a skier. I want to lean over my skis a little bit too much. Like I want to, like, I also scuba dive. Like I want to go down deeper.
Right.
And I think that that voice is trying to protect me emotionally, physically, and kind of make me stay small and put me down. And I think what I've learned over the last probably 3 decades in my practice is the more afraid I am, the more I'm digging in. Like when I'm really, when I'm really like, ooh, I don't know if I should do that. And bitchy Bertha says, no, don't do that. Don't do that. You'll ruin it. And I'm like, thank you, Bertha. I'm doing it. What's the worst that can happen? I ruin it. Okay, I ruined it. Great.
Right.
I learned that I'm not going to do that again. Or
Right.
now I have to push through what does ruined it mean? I'm making art from my heart. Like now I have to keep going deeper. And I think we talked about, you know, in my practice, I really work hard to go, you know, and not an inch deep and a mile wide, but an inch wide and a mile deep, and leaning into the fear and quieting the protective voice is one of the ways that I dig deeper. And some days I just can't, given what's going on in my life. It's like, I can't go to fear today. I can't go to push hard. There's some days, and you know, my mom just passed away like 9 months ago, and I just lost my 14-and-a-half-year-old dog like 3 weeks ago. Like, you know, sometimes it's just, you have loss, you have, you know, when my mom was in hospice care for 9 months and I was really helping her and taking care of her, my studio practice was literally getting to my studio, making the tea, closing the door, and breathing. And that, like, that's all I could do. I couldn't do any more. And I would talk to my artist friends and I'd be like, I'm not producing anything. I'm just, and they're like, are you going? Yeah, I'm going. And what do you do? I just breathe. And that's like all I could do. So I think that, you know, often we have to be gentle with ourselves. You know, we have to be kind. If you want to get work out of here, you've got to be gentle.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know in our community at Masters, we talk a lot about imposter syndrome, which is a little bit kind of what you're talking about too, is this feeling that we're never enough and that we're actually just pretending. We're not actually artists and creative and whatnot. Yeah, that's really great encouragement. I appreciate that about being kind to ourselves. A very important thing.
You're welcome. I think the imposter syndrome is something I've really struggled with. That, like, there are these tapes in my head that I don't know where I got them, but maybe it was, you know, just as a child imagining what artists are, because I knew I was an artist, so I had to sort of imagine what that was. And in my tapes, my old tapes, and by tapes, I literally imagine like a little cassette tape that you put into like an old Walkman or whatever, like a tape. My tapes are like, well, real artists paint. Real artists paint with brushes and not watercolor, not acrylic, but oil paint. Like real artists paint with oil paint, and you're making art with paper and thread. So you're not a real artist, because real artists do that. And I think that that's just my old childhood tape. And so to stop that noise, I had to, like, somebody said, well, just take that tape right out of the cassette and just, you know, shred it like that. Those are old tapes. And so I think that once I realized to be an authentic artist for me means that it's not what I make, it's not what I produce, it's how I show up in the world for myself and for other people. And what that means is that I use all of my senses. That I tend to be, my family used to say, you're so sensitive, we can't share this information with you because you're so sensitive. And I think reclaiming my sensitivity as that's one of my superpowers, is that I do have very sensitive neurology. I'm sensitive to light and sound, and so and touch, and I have to cut the tags out of my clothes, and you know, I'm sensitive, and that sensitivity, when I quiet it, comes out in my art. And I think that you know, I realize I'm an artist whether I'm washing my dishes and looking at the way the soap bubbles fall on the water, or the way the water runs off. Like, that's me, the artist, observing, and maybe that will find a way into my actual hands and my work. I'm not an artist just when I'm in my studio making. I'm an artist everywhere. And what that means in my pay the bills job is I also bring that artist kind of mentality. I'm a creative problem solver. I'm a think out of the boxer. I'm a frame the question and work within it. And so I bring my artist self to everything that I do, to my parenting, to my spousing, my momming, my, you know, I approach the world in an artistic way. And it's really not about what I produce necessarily. It's how I show up for myself.
Yeah, beautiful.
And yeah, when I finally got to that, it helped me.
Yeah, no kidding. I bet that's a huge leap for many of us. I really appreciate that. I'm also a highly sensitive person, and I think that's pretty common in the art, in the artist world. And I had the same journey of as a child that was kind of poo-pooed. Oh, she's a crybaby. She's always can't tell her anything, blah, blah, blah. And now I agree, it's my superpower. We are highly sensing. We experience the world on a really big level, which informs our work. And yeah, and that's fantastic. Finding our strengths even out of the pain, right? The painful stuff that makes life hard, right? Being sensitive is not easy or fun,
right?
But it can be a huge blessing. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and I think managing the sensitivity, one of the things that you'll do as an assignment is go on a noticing walk in our group. And I came up with that when I was working with some college students during COVID. And I woke up early one morning because I was so agitated with COVID and when was it going to end? And we're all in lockdown. And I was teaching a college class on Zoom. And so I just got up at 5. I was like, I can't sleep. I might as well make my tea and maybe I'll just go for a walk. And I'm not going for a walk to exercise. I'm not going for a walk to meet a friend and talk. I'm just going for a walk because I need to get out of bed and I'm going to just notice what I notice. And I just walked peacefully with my tea at sunrise through my neighborhood. And I noticed so much. I was like, okay, I'm going to use all my senses, you know, my sight, sound, taste, touch, and just be aware. And when I came back, I wrote in my sketchbook, thinking book, all the things that I felt and noticed alone for my 20-minute walk. And I was like, whoa, this is a really interesting activity. And so I had my 17 college students do it as homework, and then they reported back to the group. And so we're going to do that as an example of kind of how to be with ourselves and be kind and gentle to ourselves. And what do we pick up? What do we notice? And some of the students, you know, and it doesn't matter what time of the day. You don't have to do it 5 a.m. You can do it whenever. You just need to be safe doing it, obviously. And I think that cultivating the sensitivity, like not just noticing it, but now appreciating it and cultivating it in a way that works for me as an artist, and kind of honoring that sensitivity.
Yeah, and if you're a person that isn't highly sensitive, it's definitely something that can be developed and practiced.
Yeah, it's another practice. Yeah, yep. Yeah, I think it's really interesting things. One of my students said, you know, I really heard the birds walking around the campus. And he said, you know, I go on a lot of hikes with my friends in the mountains, and I thought only birds were in the mountains. I never noticed that birds were on my college campus because I never noticed them before. I was like, yeah, that's a nice thing to realize that you listen to birds and they're not, it's only because you wasn't, you know, paying attention. And I said, what's interesting to me is that you are interested in birds. You know, you might want to look into that. And he said, oh, well, I'm an ornithology major or something. And I was like, oh, great, you're already on the path. I'm like, great.
Oh, funny. Yeah, that's interesting. So you mentioned rich resources, and you've mentioned a few times sketchbooks, and I heard a little rumor that you have like 33 sketchbooks. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, as a kind of a middle school, high school, college student, I loved, you know, getting a new sketchbook, and I would start it and I would use it, but I never finished it. So I actually have like 25 sketchbooks from, you know, young, you know, as a young artist that still have pages in them. And I used to let my kids play and, you know, add theirs. So they're sort of a combo. But I would say, I know the actual date. I think it was 2004. Is that right? Yeah. 2004, I decided, okay, well, what if I really took myself seriously as an artist? Like, not just kind of pretended it was just like over there. Like, what if I really dug in? What would that look like? That's the kind of question I would ask me. Not what kind of artist do I want to be, but what would it look like? And my answer was, well, I would notice what I notice more, and I would be more present to my world. You know, I kind of like made, and I'm like, okay, well, how would I record that? Like, what would I want to take more pictures because I love my camera? What would that look like? No, I really want to commit to a book practice. Okay, well, what would that look like? Well, maybe I just buy one and see if I could fill it. Okay, let's do that. So I found this moleskin book that I really love, and I kind of just gave it reverence. And so I have a process of like opening it and kind of, you know, blessing without, I'm not religiously blessing, but just sort of like being present to the process of starting. And I date each page. I date the front of the book, so I know kind of when I'm starting. And I use it to not just journal, write, glue things in, pick stuff up. It's kind of sketchbook, scrapbook, journal, thinking book, problem solving. You know, it's kind of, some people call it an everything book, because it is an everything book, and I carry it around with me. It's always with me. Basically, it's about 6 months to fill it, give or take, depending on how much I engage with it. The reason I date the pages is that I really want to keep honest. Like, if 4 or 5 days have gone by and I haven't, like, I'll open it up to put something in or notice or write something, and I'll be like, woo, it's been a week. Okay, well, next week I'll engage more. Like, it's just a accountability buddy almost, the dating of it. My family teases me and they say, no, it's just your OCD, Mom. you're just a little obsessive compulsive, but whatever, it keeps me honest. And so then I just put it on the shelf, and I was like, well, that was fun, let's do that again. And it was kind of a natural process, but now I've done it for 12, I don't even know, well, 32, and there's 2 a year, so 16 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's not about should and have to and must. It's more like, oh, what do I do with this idea? Or where do I put this little scrap of something that I was taking ice cream sandwiches out of the freezer for my kids once. And there was like this really interesting, like, visual and I was like, that's kind of cool. Like, that's really interesting the way that graphic designer made that. Like, I kind of like that. I don't know what I like about it, but they're circles and they're stacked. And I was like, well, cut it out and put it in your book. And
cool.
So I did, and I was like, I don't really know why. And then about 4 years later, I was back. Just sometimes when I don't really know what to do in the studio, I'll grab a book and just kind of go back. And oh my gosh, the whispers of ideas that are in those books. Like I looked at that ice cream thing and I was like, oh my goodness, that looks so much like these mitosis prints that I'm making, like these circles that are like coming together and loading up. And maybe you want to, there were a lot in the introduction. And it was only in hindsight, I was like, wow, those kind of look like the outside of that ice cream box. And then I'm like, okay, well, I wonder where else I've been noticing, these shapes or these colors. And the sketchbook, if I go back, I start to notice, oh, I was looking at this idea, or I was kind of playing with this idea in the sketchbook without even being aware of it. That
Yeah.
the practice of recording and noticing what I notice and recording it, going forward, everything sort of seems blurry and you don't really know where you're headed. But when you turn around and look backwards, it's a straight line, like you start to see where things connect. And the way I sort of arrived at that, I was a young teacher teaching art at a boarding school right out of college, and an experienced artist, I think he was in his early 90s, came to visit, and I was tagged to have dinner with him. So I was 23 and he was 93, and I said,
Wow.
so what advice do you have for me as, an artist who's just starting out? Can you give me some advice? And he said, wow. He said, going forward, my whole life and career just seemed like forks in the road. You just take a right or a left. You do this or you do that, or it's you just keep making decisions and it's not really clear where you're headed. He said, but at 93, when I look back on my life, it's one straight line. And I was like,
Wow.
oh, that's really helpful. And oh, I get it. I get how this works. And I feel like the thinking book practice, noticing book, helps me see backwards. It's almost like a rear view mirror, kind of helps me see where I've been, which informs where I'm going a little bit in my work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even in journaling, I have journals that I primarily write in, but also do sketches in. And I love to go back and see where I came from and what I learned and how I've changed, and also to go back and learn again. In your sketchbooks, Deb is wondering about, so it's an everything book. Do you also plan your work in the book, or is it just mostly? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes like if I have an installation that I'm noodling over, I'll, over coffee in the morning, I'll grab it and be like, well, I could do this, or I could do that. And it, I think with my hands. So the sketching, it's like a way to get it out of my head and into a form that I can then do the next step with. And sometimes things that I put in there actually come to fruition, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes, so the process of engaging with it is really helpful. And then the second way it's helpful is the going back, the going back and looking, now that I have it going on for so long. That was a good question.
Yeah. Keep the questions coming, folks. And just a reminder, we're meeting with Milisa Galazzi, as you know, and I'll stay on the call afterwards to chat more about how to work with her. I see a few questions have come up about that, so I will show you how to do that and chat a bit about Mastrius. So I know that we use the label master, and none of our masters like it, and that's usually how I know they're going to be a great fit. And then we've put you on this pedestal, and then we work hard to take you down so that we can see that you're accessible and that our artist community knows you're just another artist on a journey and no one has arrived. So as I look forward to working with you, what is your biggest joy in working with growing artists? What's the one thing that you feel this need to pass along and to encourage and whatnot?
Well, I think one of the biggest joys that I have working with human beings, I'm really passionate about human education as opposed to, early childhood or college, or, I like the story engaging with the 93-year-old when I was 23. Like, I'm really interested in how humans learn and grow and how we share and how we connect. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what my work is about. Both my artwork and my administrative pay the bills job work is about sharing human education and human connection. And so I think what I most look forward to whenever I'm engaging with other artists in any way, whether I'm having coffee with a colleague or, keeping company with a younger artist, and I don't mean younger necessarily in age, but in, a skill set, ability,
Sure.
process. I get rejuvenated. I see new. I see, oh, I remember when I felt like that. What was that like? Oh, yeah. And to connect over that and say, well, this is the workaround. I call it workarounds when you stumble into a problem. Like, how do you work around it? Like, what do you do when you bump into that psychological challenge or personal challenge or practical challenge? Like, now I'm a new mom and I've got a little baby and I still want to make, and what is that like? And and I'll say, well, what I did was when I put my boys in the bathtub, I would sit right next to them, not when they were babies, but like young toddlers or whatever, and I would make these little tiny hand weavings where I could just throw it aside if I needed to help them. And so I just started collecting those, and then those found their way into my collages on paper. And so I think that again, like, my hands were busy, they needed 15 minutes in the bathtub to play, and they need an adult in there, and how could I do both. And so I think that when giving and receiving, I also learned a lot from older, more experienced artists. I feel like we all can learn and grow in different ways from different people. So I think that that's what I look forward to most, is kind of the give and take. And I don't feel like I'm a master in I think you described it beautifully. I mean, I think the more I learn, the less I know.
Yes.
In some ways. Or, I just have more questions and more work to do. The more I dig into the practice. And you don't ever arrive. I mean, I think that even when we take our last breath, I don't think that there's a sense that I've arrived. I think it's I'm going somewhere. So I think that if I often say, well, what will success look like for me on this project, in this moment? What does success look like? I had a friend even this morning, an art friend, who said, can you just be my accountability buddy? I'm going to text you my goals, my art goals for the day. She's a teacher and she goes back to school in September. She's trying to get the most out of August. And she texted me her 5 goals for the day. And I said, or things that she wanted to achieve. And I was like, so what does success look like? If you get one of these done, are you going to feel successul? Or are you going to feel like a failure unless you got all 5 done? I texted that back to her and she was like, oh yeah, good point. And so I think also, like, what does success feel like? And it's different at every moment. And I think that we expect so much from ourselves, and we set ourselves up for failure, not for success. And that's also I'll only be successful if I make these 15 paintings and I show them all, and all 15 sell.
Yeah.
Well, what are the chances?
Yeah, exactly. And we're always comparing ourselves to others, and it's really hard, obviously, not to. But it's something also in our community about, what are your goals? Not anyone else's goals, but what are your goals? And they don't have to be gallery representation and selling or having an online business or whatever. Really hard not to do the comparison game. Do you deal with that too?
Yeah. So comparison or jealousy. One of my artist friends once said, when you really compare yourself to someone else and you find yourself lacking, or you say, oh, well, they just got this experience, I'm really jealous of that. That is your brain saying, I want that. I want that. So instead of making it jealous, they're good, I'm bad, say, oh, I actually want that. Like, how do I get that? Like, how do I move? Like, it's an arrow pointing to, oh, and that's why paying attention and noticing what you notice, like even to your own feelings, like, oh, I'm so jealous that they just did that. And then like, oh, I guess I want to do that. Okay, well, what would that look like? How do I work towards that? And I think often move to action, so, oh, I'm jealous that they just got that experience or whatever. Go to their resume and look at what are the experiences that they've had that got them there, or if they're represented by this gallery and you want to be, like, look at how long it took them to get there, or I mean, there's clues there. I guess that's what I'm saying, is
Right.
like,
Yeah.
it's all a whole series of, like, oh, if you're jealous of that and you want that, there's information there.
Yeah, I think they say success leaves clues. I've heard.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I do want to, excuse me, dive into those 5 ways to make a profit you mentioned earlier. Before we get there, Deb is wondering, what do you use to keep yourself on schedule?
Yeah.
What are your tricks and
so I'm
tips?
old-fashioned. I'm a paper person. I use the calendar, and
Oh, old-fashioned.
Oh, super old-fashioned. I need paper, I need pencil.
Yeah.
And so that's what I have, a couple calendars. That's sort of my day-to-day, week-to-week. But I've also created a yearly calendar that I have on my thinking wall in my studio. And the thinking wall has whispers of ideas. It's kind of like my sketchbook on the wall. Like, I pick up things or whatever, and I've created a yearly calendar that sets goals. At the very top, it's like, okay, broad brushstroke, what do I hope to achieve in this year? And then one of the things that I realized, I used to just have a goal sheet, and I would write, this is the goal, when it was achieved, what help I needed in order to achieve that goal, because we can't do everything, where we need help. And asking for help is, a practice in itself. And I think that, what I realized was that if I wanted to get into gallery shows, museum shows, they work like 18 months to 3 years out. And so my record keeping wasn't that far out. And so now I have, this year, next year, and the next year. And so I could say, well, if I apply for this, then I will hear in 6 months, and then I would actually do it in a year and a half from now, so I can kind of plot it out. And it's big, it's on my studio wall, and I will definitely share that with the group. And I keep them, I stand back and I'm like, wow, that was a busy year. Or, when my mom was dying and I was really engaged in her process, I actually wrote on that calendar, like, mom's bedside these months, like, so that I could see, what am I spending my time doing? Sometimes it's not just how do you stay on track, but how do you notice where you are spending your time, and giving myself the grace to notice, okay, well, that I'm only gonna keep company with my mom in this way for this short amount of time, and my studio is going to be there, but I put it on my studio wall, so when I walk back in, I'm like, okay, where am I? Oh yeah, that's where I am. Here's where I'm going. So I think, again, like, it's not just messages for myself, but I kind of orient myself to where I am visually with messages on the wall and calendars, and I'm very visual, and most artists are visual. Most visual artists are visual. I think that musicians might track it more with their ears, like they listen to podcasts or they whatever, but I'm so I think the more, because we're visual artists, I mean, I would assume that just about everybody watching this interview is a visual artist. Track visually. It's your way. So if it's paper calendars, it's books, it's get it out on the wall, get it, visual reminders. I use a lot of Post-it notes. I'm
Me too.
yeah, gotta see
Yeah,
it.
that's good. That's awesome. Okay, so you mentioned earlier 5 ways to be profitable as an artist.
Yeah.
Can we dive in a few minutes?
Yeah. Okay, so like the old-fashioned way is you inherit the money and you don't really have to work. You just like, it comes down from generations, or you marry the money and somebody
Right.
supports you. That's like number one, is like the money shows up. Bless
Yeah.
the people that have that. Awesome. Love it. Not everybody. Another way is you are an artist and you, as much as possible, keep your expenses as low as possible, and you apply for grants and funding, and you go on residencies, and so you grants and residencies, and I guess you could kind of put commissions in that kind of bucket too, but it's hard to make a living off of commissions. Another way is that you say you really want to paint whatever you want to paint, and you don't want to sell your paintings, but you realize like you also like ceramics and you make a lot of mugs, and the mugs actually really sell, and so you create a line of something else that isn't your heart and soul, it's just the thing you do.
Sure.
Or you really get your greeting card business up and running, or Hallmark buys your greeting cards, but really what you want to do is paint, so the greeting cards kind of fund the painting kind of thing. Like it's a, or you're a graphic designer and you build websites.
Sure. Yeah.
And then you paint because you really want to be painting, like something like that. Like you're using your artistic talent, but in a kind of a duality. That's a pretty popular way to do it. Another way is you really decide, okay, I'm gonna pay the electric bill and the shoes on my kids' feet with this pay the bills job. So now I want to get a pay the bills job that allows me the time. So often teaching, education gives you, chunks of vacation off, summers, that kind of thing. And that also, I think you have to be protective of what kind of pay the bills job you get, because it can sap you of your energy. And what I found was when I was teaching high school art at a boarding school, I had nothing left. I was giving it all to my students because I was living with them and I was teaching them, and I was in an art studio every day, but there was no room for me to make my art. And I was like, okay, well, maybe if I'm an education administrator, then I'll have something left. And I did. So I've sort of segued more into administration because it's kind of easier for me. And then I have more time for the art, and time, not just time, but also like emotional space and energy. And I know there's a fifth way and I can't remember what that was. I guess the fifth way is like the hardest way, which is you make something that, okay, paintings, and you start selling them for $200, and then somehow 2,000, and then somehow 20,000, and then somehow 200,000. Like that is like, that's the dream, right? That's
Right.
like the panacea, but that is really, really hard to do. And I think that, like Vincent van Gogh, I heard that he did not sell a single painting in his lifetime. Like literally did not sell a painting. And now his work is on Sotheby's, Van Gogh paintings are going for the highest, like $140 million for a painting. And he didn't sell a single one. So what's up with that? And so I think that's the fifth way, is what I realize is that the success of my art career really needs to be measured in decades and generations.
Oh, yes.
Not in single paintings and single gallery shows. Like I joke and I say, well, I hope that my grandchildren, or maybe their children, benefit from the art that I'm making now. And
Yeah.
so which is why I have a pay the bills job. You know, like that is supporting me now. And I hope that the work that I make, I really work hard to use really good materials that are going to be archival, that are going to last. Like, I really hope that 100 years from now, my work is still around and still has some meaning to somebody, and they might, you know, buy, sell, take it, protect it.
Treasure it,
And
yeah.
because I take that really long view, it kind of frees up the moment, partly. Like, I don't put pressure on, I got to make a painting right now that's really good, that's going to sell tomorrow, because I got to pay the bills.
Yeah.
It frees me up to make the work that I want to make, and make it with the materials that, the best quality materials that I can afford, and really learn about archival techniques, and really because I would like this work to last. And also, my goal is to get my work into a museum, you know, individual pieces into a museum. And I've shown in museums, but I haven't had an acquisition yet. Though I'm noodling. I'm understanding how it works, which is part of the challenge of being an artist, is figuring out how the art world works. And one of the challenges with that is that the art world is changing so quickly, given the online world, and brick and mortar galleries are not necessarily the panacea, and New York blue chip galleries are not necessarily the way art is bought and sold now. And so it's changing very quickly. So it's one thing to be an artist and to make work, but then figuring out where that work wants to be out in the world is the third challenge. But when that world is changing very quickly, it's even harder to figure it out. So that's another thing that, you know, I'm realizing and kind of understanding. And the reason that I want to get a piece or pieces into museums is that their job is to protect the work in perpetuity. And so, and it's not about money, it's about cultural conversation. It's about work was made at this time in this way, which was about, you know, the time in history that it was made. And so the museum is archiving it to protect that message. So, you know, I think that money confuses the art conversation.
Money confuses a lot of things.
Money can, and at the end of the day, money is energy, right? It's currency, it's energy. And how that currency, energy, money conversation interacts with studio work and the making. I think that those are different types of conversations, and you have to be very careful when you conflate them, because it muddies the making, and it muddies the process. And so I think for many, many years, the tape in my head was, I will be a successful artist when I make art that sells, that supports me. Woo!
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it is.
And, you know, some people say that and make it happen. But the kind of work that I make isn't the kind of work that sells like that. So do I change the work that I make so that it will sell? Or do I make the work I want to make and figure out how to make the money somewhere else? Like, I think, Did that answer your question? I mean, it's a tricky conversation to have.
It is. And, you know, in our master's community, we talk about that a lot too. And some say that until you're painting or creating what you're passionate about, and you're really honest about that process and pulling from a really authentic place, you won't find success until you can get there. But then I guess the definition of success isn't always monetary, right?
That's what I've decided. And I don't think it's a cop-out.
No, I agree.
I mean, I think some people could say, well, your art doesn't sell, so you don't really care about selling, so you're copping out because you've changed the definition of success not to include selling. Well, Yeah, but I get to decide. It's my work. It's my definition of
Exactly.
success. I'm not,
Yeah.
if I were making money, if I were making art for the marketplace, then yes, but I've chosen not to make art for the marketplace. I'm
Well,
making
and
art for me.
the flip side I've heard too, where I make art for galleries to sell. It's a business to me, and I've been told that's copying out as well. That I'm not being authentic or whatever. So, but for me, this is my goal. This is what I want to do. So I agree with you. It's two sides of the same coin.
Right.
We need to decide what is success for us. Yeah.
Exactly. Every artist has to decide. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges about being an artist, is that for every artist that exists, whether you're a visual artist or a dancer, a musician, or a cabinet maker, woodworker, everyone, there is no one path. If you want to become an accountant, there is one path to being an accountant.
Yeah.
You go learn the trade, you get really good at it, you either work for an accounting firm or you start your own. Like, that's it. I don't think there's a lot of other ways to become an accountant. But there is as many ways, as many artists as there are, there's ways to be an artist. And so once I realized that there is not even, there's not one, it is my path. I have to forge this path, which is why I started at the very beginning by saying, I'm an artist. I bring my art self to everything that I do because it's my path. It's my choice. It's my, and that is both freeing and it is terrifying. And it is, you know, I have chosen this path of being an artist. And it is not, the path is not out there that I have to go find. The path is in here.
Yeah.
And that's why I spend so much time being quiet and getting quiet, because I want to listen to my voice and be true to myself and honest with what I need and want. Because I can contort and this was a long fought, hard, I mean, I have a therapist on speed dial that I have been working, you know, this has come from a lot of introspection, and because the tapes and the conditioning is very strong. And so I think that we all have to figure it out for ourselves. And I think that's why Mastrius is so successful, is there are a lot of people out there going, but I need help. How do I figure this out on my own? How do I make this happen? And I think, yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to say, and we love to tackle that by working with many artists who have walked the path before us, because there isn't one way to do it. There's many different experiences, and that's what we want to put in front of people is, that it's a unique thing. Yeah.
And we all have to figure it out for ourselves, given our own passions, interests, needs, must, have to's. You know, your circumstance is different from mine. And, you know, given that, you have a different set of challenges to work around or figure out, also different gifts, different strategies, different ways to approach it. And so it's all, we're all unique human beings having our own experience. And I think that people who are not artists or don't have an artistic sensibility, I mean, we need accountants, for goodness sakes. We need people who put the numbers in the rows and, you know, total them up, like, thank God. But it couldn't be more different from what we do as artists, you know? And so to give ourselves the space, if you're looking for the answers out there and the right way to do it, it is going to be a fool's errand. That's what I have found. Because you can't find, you can look at 30 people who have figured it out for themselves, and you can learn from each of those 30 different people. Well, I'll take a little bit of that and I'll take a little bit of that. It's like, but there is no one path out there that's it. You can say, well, that's the path for me, maybe right now. Great. But then your circumstance is going to change, and then it's not going to work. And then you're going to have to figure out another path.
And you might not find your joy on that path. So it really has to start internally. It looks good, but you don't really know. And we're at the hour, and I think that's a beautiful spot to leave it, Milisa, that your path needs to come from inside, and that it's yours and yours only, and it's a one-of-a-kind, unique journey, but done better with others side by side in community. Yeah, let's learn together. Let's encourage each other. Don't try to reinvent the wheel, get advice and make it easier for yourself, because it's hard enough. It really is hard enough.
Right, exactly. And share, I think that the last thing I'll say is I think that the old model was a competitive model of there isn't enough to go around. And so I'm going to crawl on your back and, and I think that we are finding that when we come from a sharing model and there is enough, more than enough, and if we can share and support, then we all get further.
That's right. Yeah, that's literally like our mantra. We go further, faster together. Yeah. Exactly. Beautiful. What a great discussion, Milisa. Thank you.
Thank you. So
my heart is full.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and what an honor. And I hope that, I feel like this is planting seeds and, little ideas here and there. Take what you like. You might disagree with things that I said, and that's fine. That's also part of it.
Milisa, really impactful. That's like a breath of fresh air. Really appreciate your thoughts, experience, and how much you share. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. It was
all righty.
Bye.
The honor is ours. Thank you.